Welcome to the Blue Yonder Overland podcast. I'm your main host, Jen, and I'm so excited to welcome you back to this show that is all about inspiring and empowering you to get more outdoor adventure into your life, however that looks, but especially to make overlanding more approachable. Each week, we bring you tips and tricks for vehicle-based adventuring, interviews with folks that are doing it, and just breaking down any mental barriers you may have to really embracing an adventurous life. If you have any comments or questions to follow up about this episode, feel free to send me a direct message at Blue Yonder Jen on Instagram or Threads, and we'll be posting all of the show notes and links on blueyonder-adventures.com. And there's also a contact form there if you're not on social media and want to send a comment that way. Welcome back to the Blue Yonder Overland podcast. I am lucky enough to have my husband, Matt Hager, sitting with me this morning.
Hey, everyone.
And today, we are already thinking ahead to next week, kind of getting ready for Overland Expo Pacific Northwest. So we'll probably take a break next week and publish our last episode of this season the following week. However, I did want to get a chance to revisit some of the topics that we've talked about over the course of this season and mention any updates, things we've learned, questions that we've heard, revisiting just across the board some of the topics that we've delved into. And so wanted Matt on today specifically to get his opinion on some of those things. But before we dive into some of those frequently asked questions or updates on things that we've shared, I wanted to set the tone by just thinking about where we have found adventurous inspiration in the last week. So, Matt, do you want to go first? What's been inspiring you lately?
It's been an interesting week. I don't know if I can sort of lay my hat on one specific thing. The gear up for Overland Expo Pacific Northwest and going to it in sort of a different way. In the past I had gone with CampWorks and was there to, show off and sell trailers. This time we're going with my new company, Arda. And we're actually setting up an exhibitor lounge as a place for folks who have been on their feet for a long time, forgetting to eat, forgetting to drink water, forgetting their sunscreen, that sort of stuff, to come by, grab those things. And so just a mindset shift of going into sort of a servant versus a sales role.
Yeah.
And it's been an interesting, thought exercise.
Yeah, I feel like you're actually perfectly positioned to offer a great lounge experience to people who are there as vendors or support staff because you've been in that role. So you kind of bring a unique perspective to being able to serve those folks.
Yeah.
It's like, exactly what they don't have time to do or the things they'll have forgotten and wish they had. So.
Yep. Definitely.
Yeah.
But I'm also looking forward. The Bend area where this expo is just beautiful. It's been years since I've spent any real time there. So trying to figure out how to maximize our time down there.
That'll be awesome. Yeah. I'm excited. Let's see. For me.
How about you? Yeah.
For me, for adventurous inspiration for the week, I would say it was the hike I took yesterday out in the Olympic National Forest region, just south of Sequim, Washington. It's a hike Matt and I actually did where we proposed to each other after we'd already planned our wedding.
So out of order, but it worked.
Yeah. This hike is a little bit unique. It's down to Slab Creek. You can take it all the way to Deer Creek Campground, actually, in Olympic National Park. But I just took it 3 miles down to the riverside and then walk back up. And that's kind of what makes it unique, is because it's down first. So it's one of those, so many of the hikes in Washington, you're hiking up an elevation to a viewpoint or the top of a mountain and then back down. It's one of the few where it's the reverse. So it's kind of fun to mix it up if you're building some mileage and be able to find some of those hikes that just challenge your body in a slightly different way. And it was a little bit misty and rainy in the morning, and it was very covered in trees. So it's just still a beautiful hike and just gave me so much good time and space to think and reflect. And I was just in such a good mood, remembering that this is where we were proposing to each other and planning our wedding. And so it was just fun to revisit one of those wild spaces with so many good memories attached.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So that's adventurous inspiration for the week. And then diving into some of the topics that I wanted to discuss. One, we were starting to get into an interesting discussion around rooftop tents. And we had an episode where we kind of covered a lot of the basic pros and cons about different camping setups that you might choose to do. But rooftop tents, I think, warrants a little bit further discussion because it's really its own big category. And it's one of the most popular categories that we see within the overlanding space. It's one of the ones we get questions about most frequently from folks who are considering getting into it because it just seems like a very obvious next step from a ground tent camping to rooftop tent. But then there's also a lot of questions about, is the weight worth it? Is it actually easy? Like, does it introduce any other things you have to be worried about? And so wanted to give a little space to circle back to rooftop tents because there's a lot of differences across rooftop tents too. And I don't think we really touched on that last time. So Matt, maybe you want to give a start with sort of how you look at rooftop tents and where you started your investigation in terms of determining which one was right for you.
Yeah. So one, I've owned multiple rooftop tents, and then with the time at CampWorks, got to experience a bunch more. And I think rooftop tents, just like everything in the industry, come down to, what is most important to you and what compromises are you willing to make. So, when you look at different things within the rooftop tent space, as in what factors do you want to take into account? There's things like price, quality, type of rooftop tent, how big it is, how quick it deploys, its ability to stand up to weather, its ability to stand up to wind. All these things become factors that go into sort of a rooftop tent decision. And those break down into, I would say rooftop tents in general break down into a few categories. You have your soft top rooftop tents. You have your clamshell hard-sided rooftop tents. Sometimes within the hard-sided ones, you also have non-clamshell sort of full pop-ups. And then you have this sort of new category of sort of a hybrid between the two. And each one of those, and within each category, there's ones that perform better at different things. For example, if you take a look at clamshells, there are some that are really robust and handle wind and weather really well. And there's some and are super comfortable. And there's some that are very lightweight, low profile, but less, robust, that you don't have the ability to mount things to the side of them or stuff like that. So I think, one of the first considerations is, what vehicle are you putting on and how well does it fit? I remember I very quickly ruled out soft-sided tents way back in the day. And that was largely a decision made on being able to set it up with one person and close it with one person and do that quickly. Mm-hmm. That sort of automatically ruled out the soft-sided ones. But it meant that I put a really big tent on top of my Subaru Forester, and it looked funny. It reminded me of that character in Mario Kart, the mushroom with sort of the big head on top of a small body.
But it could still handle the weight, like technically. You weren't worried from a technical consideration.
It wasn't a weight issue. It was just an aesthetics issue, which is something we saw on our trailers at CampWorks too. People putting sort of the large clamshell styles on a small body, and it didn't always work. Mm-hmm. It also, if you are looking to take it on and off, for example, my dad and sister, when they were getting one, that was something that they wanted to do. They wanted to be able to swap it between two vehicles easily. And so they ended up going with the soft-sided one because it's a Yakima, because it had sort of a built-in hand loosen mechanism and wasn't terribly heavy. So the two of them can handle the move itself. Whereas when you can take ours, which is the Bush Company Alpha. They've renamed it now. I can't remember what it is. It's 210 pounds by itself. And so the thought of moving that is just not really feasible.
Yeah. Not something you're going to be doing very often anyway.
Yeah. So that's, really where, if you're in the rooftop tent buying process, think about, okay, how important is time to close? And we're talking order of magnitudes different. Take a clamshell might take 60 seconds to close. A soft-sided thing, even if they say it closes quickly, in fact, they're really difficult. You're talking 5, 10 minutes, oftentimes very frustrating minutes.
Especially if it's rainy or something.
Yep.
Or windy.
Yep. Yeah. Rainy, windy, cold, I think is the one, fabric gets stiffer in the cold. Your hands get stiffer in the cold. It can be
more difficult to work with straps and buckles.
But if you're planning on going to, a campsite and spending 3 or 4 days there and never having to move the vehicle, who cares if it takes you 10 minutes? It's quicker, or it's as quick as setting up a ground tent, and a lot more comfortable. And you could get huge spaces. And so you could have your family up there. Like, there are certainly great things about the soft-sided tents. They're usually more affordable. So don't shy away. There are ones that are better to close up than others.
In terms of quality, that's something I want to revisit, because I feel like you also had a very unique perspective in getting to work with industry partners over the last year and really getting to kind of put things through their paces and see behind the scenes the quality of some of these products. So across those three, that you kind of talked about 3 categories, do you have any brands that particularly stand out in your mind as like, these are quality products, these are folks doing great things and would recommend?
Yeah, I think there's a few very standout brands in my mind. The primary one that comes to mind is Roof Space. They're newer on the scene. I've gotten to both install, use, and see them multiple times. Really, really great quality. I mean, just exquisitely engineered. Will sort of hold up to the test of time. Lots of interesting things thought through. If I had a favorite tent on the market, it would be this. If we replace our tent, it's what we're replacing our tent with. They have now 2 sizes, a 2-person and a 4-person. I mean, just really great. They're actually sort of a hybrid system as well. They sort of pioneered that area.
What do you mean by that exactly?
By that I mean it's the size of a soft top fold up. It completely folds out and over, but it closes and sets up. Its sort of base is hard sided, and it closes and sets up about the same time that it takes a clamshell.
Yeah, like 60 seconds. In your setup.
Even less, and very easy with 1 person. Really, really great. Highly, highly recommend those.
It's pretty lightweight too.
Very lightweight. It checks off a lot of boxes. It is a touch on the pricey side, but not exorbitantly so. So that I think is definitely the standout. Some other people that are great in the space. 4x4 Colorado has a pretty wide range of stuff fitting different things. Their quality is excellent. Their people are excellent. Then you get into sort of the big standards. Go FSR is a reputable brand. iCamper. I have some other iCamper products. I've seen iCampers. I've never heard anyone unhappy about their iCampers. There's a few that Falcon Nest, Roof Nest. I've definitely heard some bad things about them. Just general quality. It's certainly a space where you get what you pay for. The big ones, Thule, Yakima, I've installed a couple Thules. They sort of have a proprietary mounting system that I really don't like.
That's another good thing to note is just, how, especially if you're thinking about moving it at all frequently, then the mounting system becomes a lot more important.
Yeah. Although Thule does have a trailer hitch mounted tent that I was very excited about coming out in the spring of next year.
Okay. That would kind of put it in a unique space too, where you're off the ground and you have that sort of comfort level, but not as high, which for some folks might be exactly what they're looking for
if you're looking to take it on and off, it's a really cool way of doing it. It sort of has wheels. It looked like it was well thought out. I haven't been able to use it and put it through its paces, but seeing the demo and everything, it's something that I would even consider for us.
Okay.
If you are looking for something that's going to stay on, you want to go clamshell, you want to not care about what weather you've got, anything like that, looking at Bush Company, I've been very happy with ours.
Cool. One other question related to rooftop tents. Would you buy secondhand or would you always go straight to the source?
I would buy secondhand. Some of the things to look for when you're buying secondhand, take a look at the mounting rails. They're sort of the weak spot in that they can be bent as tents come on and off, and it can create sort of weakness in the mounting mechanism, but also make it hard to remount the tent. Make sure, you see it fold open, close, be around, walk through that, try to do it yourself. Sometimes, missing or broken elastic straps or stuff like that can really impact how a tent closes. Yeah, I think, but other than that, particularly for a quality brand, let's take iCamper, for example. I would in a heartbeat buy an iCamper used. One thing to consider too with most of these brands is you can, replace the mattress and upgrade the mattress and do stuff like that. There's a bunch of aftermarket stuff usually sort of sold by the company, but this partial inflate sort of mix between inflating and foam is sort of a new thing that's coming out and quite positive reviews. Our tent has so much space in it. We don't need that. We can have 6 inches of mattress and still have room to close, but not all tents are like that.
Yeah, that's a good point though, is the mattress quality probably isn't something that you're really considering when you're looking at a rooftop tent because it's so easy to upgrade that, specified to however comfortable and how firm you want your mattress.
Yep.
Cool. Moving on from rooftop tents, one other sleeping situation that I don't think we touched on at all was hammocks, which is actually a favorite way for you to relax. We have gone out with some friends who really like hammocks as like a primary sleeping situation. So curious to discuss a little bit of pros and cons of the hammock sleeping situation.
Yeah, the big one being finding, if you're going dispersed or actually at campgrounds, having the right tree set up for hammocks, particularly multiple hammocks. Not always a problem, but I could think of a handful of our favorite dispersed sites that are just not hammockable. There are lots of and they've really grown in quality and availability over the last 5 years, different hammock mounting mechanisms. So some that fold out from the trailer hitch, some that fold out of the side, or are just completely self-standing. So Yobo Gear, Summit has one, Hammock has an interesting one that sort of mounts partially to a roof rack. Lots of options there to be able to hammock in every spot. Really great during the summer. You are certainly less insulated in every case. You have air coming down below you. You have air above you. You have sort of air all around. So if you are planning on sleeping there and it even gets into the 50s, make sure you're adding some air insulation below, so an inflatable mat actually in your hammock, or egg foam or something like that, to provide an insulation from the bottom. But yeah, I mean, I love hammocks, are super comfortable. I've never camped overnight in one just because we've never had to, or it's not been our thing. But if I was out personally, I would do it.
Yeah, cool. I just thought all the new hardware around the hammocks really solve that problem of you don't have to find the perfect spot with perfectly situated trees anymore. So it's kind of cool.
I'm curious. We'll have to go when we're at the Overland Expo. We'll have to specifically scope out and see what's happening there. I mean, it's been a really interesting, you see a pendulum swing going from 5 years ago. It was all about the rooftop tents. And now it's all about, or it's sort of the pendulum swinging into really well-designed ground tents and cots and hammocks and stuff like this. I mean, even when we were at Overland Expo down in LA, some of the stuff I saw was just really well made 4-season tents and things like that. I'm actually kind of curious to really focus on that.
Interesting. One thing that we touched on in an earlier episode was finding community within overlanding, and I talked a little bit about online groups. I've since gone and joined a couple of Facebook groups related to overlanding. I've been kind of exploring what they might have to offer, and I find it's a pretty mixed bag, and I think some of that might come down to Facebook itself. I've also gone and joined some overlanding Reddit groups in the last year, and it's just fun to kind of explore the different characters and sort of the norms of those different places, because it can be very different from online group to online group. I think what I'm finding is folks that are joining any of these groups hoping to get exact coordinates and posting about like, hey, I need a spot near X national park. I don't see why you would do that. Most people just get made fun of, or kind of like they're not given help if they're looking for specific spots in a lot of those forums, because why would you post coordinates to a fantastic spot in a public forum, I think is most people's thinking. I do find what I've noticed is pretty helpful in some of those forums is trip reports or trail conditions especially for BDR routes, backcountry discovery routes in different states. So folks wondering if a certain pass is clear, or heading into spring weather, if certain sections are passable or rideable if they're on dirt bikes, things like that. And so that it can be a great place for up-to-date sort of seasonal trail and road conditions, I think. Mm-hmm. I do also see folks asking for sometimes generalized advice, which is a real mixed bag. Sometimes I do see them asking also for feedback on specific gear or accessories that they might be considering. And again, I think that's a pretty mixed bag in terms of you'll have people who are very vocal proponents as well as people in strong opposition to it on all of these forums. So I'm curious what you, Matt, have used online forums or online communities of any sort in order to research questions, like where you would trust crowdsourced wisdom, or if you would just kind of use that as one of many data points in researching decisions about gear and things like that.
Yeah. I've always been a pretty passive consumer of forums as a data point. I think particularly in areas where my knowledge is less capable. So take anything really related to the truck. I was a big fan of Tacoma World, used it for troubleshooting issues, for if I was looking at upgrades, any general thoughts on what people have used, their success with it, things like that. And that just became a data point. Same when I was doing rooftop tent research for my second tent. In general, for products, I sort of look for strong negatives and then read what they're negative about and decide, like, one, is that an important consideration or is that expected? And sort of the frequency of that. I would say those are probably the two biggest things that I've done. When we've scoped out new areas, particularly like down in Sedona, using some of the forums, not looking for spots, but hey, like this road is good, or here's sort of the rules for the area. Sometimes it's easier to find that information on the forums than on the government's websites.
Yeah. I'm thinking about our Canadian research as well. We were looking at some forums there just to try to learn, like, what do we even need to pay attention to? What are the rules of the road up here?
Yeah. What's important to the locals, things like that. Yeah, certainly have tried, or I haven't crowdsourced spots, but I have seen some. And if I see a spot on a forum, I typically assume that it's going to be always taken, because there are people that will just, okay, that's my spot on this road now. So yeah, hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah. Well, and I think looking at online forums, it can also be, sometimes they'll post real world meetups, and, you know, that can be a great source if you're looking for folks to actually get out with. But then beyond that, I just see a lot of people just looking for sort of
the easy way out.
Yeah.
Overlanding, in my opinion, is a little bit of exploration. And so, yeah, just looking for a great campsite is not the whole purpose.
Yeah. Well, I think that's something that we've tried to embody more on this podcast too, is really sort of talking about and showing how, for us, a lot of it is the joy of the discovery. And I would prefer to go explore an unknown road with you where we might have no viable campsites on the route, but have a great time mapping and exploring it, versus going to some place that's known with a lot of traffic in the area.
Yeah.
For me, I'd take the chance on the unknown most times.
Yeah, I mean, after we get the Tacoma fixed, then we're back out really camping a lot, probably in the fall. You know, we have enough spots in this area that we never have to explore again, but we will certainly go exploring.
Yeah, I want to map like every national forest road, which actually brings us to a timely point for anyone who's listening to this across the U.S. Apparently, a lot of the public land sell-off provisions made their way back into the latest Senate budget bill. And so they were taken out of the House bill when that went through a lot of advocacy. But if you haven't called or emailed your senators yet to make sure they get taken out of the Senate bill, that would be awesome, because I've seen some of those maps that folks have posted online about which areas would be impacted, and it's horrifying to see. It's a lot of places with amazing dispersed camping. It's a lot of the national forest land that's usually adjacent to national parks. So we're talking places near Mount Rainier, places near Olympic National Park. And if that went away or was sold off, it would be devastating for the overlanding community. So just a quick plug for that.
Yeah, about 80% of the spots that we have mapped fall under areas that would fall or be sold.
Yeah. Okay, Matt, are there any other topics top of mind that we've hit on throughout the season where then afterwards you had a thought like, oh, we should have mentioned that, or some new information has come to light that you want to make sure we hit on?
Nothing really comes to mind.
Okay, great. Well, I'm going to let you go then, and I am going to take a couple other updates that I've seen come through that we haven't even had a chance to discuss yet, just around different mapping software, Overland, Onyx, a few others. And so I'll let you go and do a little bit deeper dive into some of those mapping systems.
Great, thanks.
Hi, folks. It's just Jen here, back with you to round out some of our updates and deep dives on information that we might have referenced earlier, but have more information available now. And one of those updates is related to some of the mapping software that we discussed. I think it was back in episode 2 or 3. And so one of the free resources I mentioned online is ioverlander.com. It's both a website and an app. And it's gotten a bit of buzz within the overlanding community this spring because they released an updated version of their app that now has a subscription paywall. There's a lot of reasons why they did this. Overland Journal podcast apparently does a deep dive with the team that are behind iOverlander about why they did it, the fact that
This has grown from a crowdsourced app over many, many years, built on antiquated platforms, and just really needing an overhaul to make it all a bit easier to manage, as well as the fact that, of course, doing so requires some money and expertise. And so now they're charging. However, if you go to ioverlander.com, you can still find a ton of information for free. So while it might not be great to use as an app unless you're going to bite the bullet and pay for it, there is still some great information available for free. For instance, I'm looking at some of our favorite spots. Double-edged sword there. I'm a little bit sad that these are listed on publicly accessible forums. They've got the exact GPS coordinates that I'm looking at, as well as recent check-ins and descriptions of folks noting road conditions. And so it is still definitely usable as sort of a research site for you. And if you're just getting started, it could be a great place to find some great sites and recent trail conditions. The other one that I wanted to talk about is a service that we didn't even mention in our overview of some of the mapping software, and that is called CalTopo, CalTopo. And I've seen this come up in both Facebook forums and Reddit forums now, with some folks saying that it is better than Onyx or Gaia. So I was intrigued, and I've actually found a really great review in the Overlanding Reddit forum about comparing CalTopo, Onyx, and Gaia. And a couple points that I got from reading through, this person seems to be a super user because they use it not only for overlanding and hiking, but also for some disaster relief and response work. And so they're bringing in stuff from national park and national forest teams and government information that they're able to import with some of the work that they're doing. And so using it for a lot of different types of uses. And some of the things that they note, which I thought were really interesting, is for Onyx, they were pretty frustrated in terms of the offline map resolution. There's kind of a low and medium resolution that they noted, but in order for it to be actually usable off-road, you really needed to go with the medium resolution, but they felt then that took so much data. And so they wish there was an option sort of in between those two. The low resolution they felt was unusable to actually be able to be helpful when you were off-road and offline. And so that was a major sticking point with Onyx. I think there's also just a few more limitations, and that it seems to be very sort of easy to use in terms of understanding the interface and quickly getting used to it. But what I'm seeing from across multiple different forums is that I think a lot of folks started using Gaia earlier and find it easier to manage their data and their waypoints and tracking in Gaia in terms of managing information. And if you're doing a lot of exploring, most people seem to agree that Gaia is better for that. However, CalTopo, folks are saying, is maybe even better than Gaia, also might be cheaper for getting basic offline map support. And since that's often a paid feature. And so one of the reviews that I'm reading in the Overlanding Reddit is that data management does seem to be best on CalTopo. And what's also interesting, though, is whether you can overlay maps. And that is something that was discussed. So, and that's for those of you that haven't tried this yet, it's really, really helpful to be able to overlay, for instance, the motor vehicle use maps that the U.S. National Forest Service puts out. It's useful to be able to overlay those with topographical maps or public land ownership maps. And that way you can tell who owns the land that you're currently on, make sure it's actually accessible for public camping, but also it's helpful to be able to look at topo features and road features. And so being able to specify the level of opacity of the layers in terms of what you're seeing and what's transparent is also really, really helpful. And that is something that was mentioned on this review of CalTopo, is that there was no opacity setting on the map overlays. And that's something that me and other users have commented that we really actually like the Gaia ability to use a slider and choose the level of opacity or transparency you want different maps. So depending on what you want to focus on in that moment, maybe what you're really curious about is the elevation change or gain. So you want to look at the topo layer, or maybe you really want to look at the Forest Service roads and what might be accessible, or maybe you want to try and get a satellite image and see tree clearing. All of those reasons why you might want to slide between different map layers. And so having the ability to choose the transparency and the opacity of map layers, for me when I'm exploring, is something that's pretty important. So for that reason, I'd probably stick with Gaia. But I did think it was really interesting, and it's just sort of hilarious. It's one of those things that you could really geek out on. So if you really want to geek out on it, I think Reddit is one of the best places to really geek out on something versus something like Facebook, I think, is often more about sort of the social connection, but it's also, I found a lot of uninformed views and misinformation sometimes, or just personal biases tends to show up in Facebook. And not that it doesn't show up on any online forum, but I think what I've seen on Reddit is just really technical users of different products and apps like what I'm talking about here with Caltopo or Gaia, who really truly enjoy geeking out on all the features and putting them through their paces, and you could really benefit from that. Obviously, there's also some great YouTube reviews if you really want to see these different apps in action. So that could be another good way of testing out what app might work best for you as you're getting into mapping and exploring more in the backcountry. Okay, and then lastly, wanted to close out today just doing a little preview of Overland Expo Pacific Northwest down in Redmond, Oregon next week. We're going to be there for the full weekend and hopefully able to camp a little bit on the way and on the way back. So it'll be a little bit of an unusual week for us. So we're going to take a break from the podcast, and I'll get our last episode of our season posted that following week. So we'll also include anything we learn about at Overland Expo. If you have anything, burning questions or products that you want us to check out while we're down there, feel free to shoot me a message or comment at Blue Yonder Jen on Instagram or Threads. Like Matt mentioned, it's a really great place to check out the latest new innovations and products and actually get to see, touch, handle them in person and really put them through their paces and see how they work. And it can give you ideas of things you didn't even know you wanted or needed, which can be dangerous, but also is really, really fun. And we're also going to be camping on site, so we'll just have a lot of time to kind of learn from other people's experience as well and get to trade stories and tips and tricks. And then I've also been starting to look through the class schedule, which most of these are free to attend. If you purchase a day pass or a weekend pass, they have a just plethora of different classes and exhibitors going on all weekend long. And so depending on sort of what you're interested in learning about, it can be a great place to further your knowledge and get you excited about your next trip. They've got some geographic specific sessions. So if you're, for instance, really interested in doing an overland trip down to Baja or going up to Canada or South America, they've got sessions on each one of those things that sort of cover some of the logistics, maybe how to get through border checkpoints, things to think about, security-wise, etc. And then they've got a whole bunch of sort of they have a hands-on pavilion. So classes that are super practical, like trail tire repair and first aid 101. And then they also have a pavilion dedicated to women who wander, which I love to see. And so it's not only helping connect women in the overlanding space, talking about different tools and gear and sort of how to make them work for you as a woman. But also talking about things like security concerns, things like that you might be a little more top of mind, especially if you're going as a solo woman overlander. And then they've got a whole bunch of showcase areas and vehicles that they're featuring. So if you just kind of want to understand some of the pros and cons, if you're thinking about a vehicle or a specific type of rig setup or trying to figure out what might be best for you, it's a great way to go and see sort of the pros and cons of a lot of different types of setups, which is pretty cool. So that's a little bit about what we're excited to see down at Overland Expo. And hopefully we'll meet a bunch of other awesome folks, just like we did at Overland SoCal, and be ready to share some of those learnings and adventure tips and tricks with you all. So thanks for tuning in, and you'll hear more from us in a couple weeks' time. And until then, hope to see you out in the wild blue yonder.